Hey, good morning. Uh, this morning we're going to do chapter 3 in loosening the grip, and that's alcohol in the body, and how it affects us and how our body changes it and all that good stuff. And this is key to understanding the phenomenon of addiction, but it's also key to understanding the phenomenon of alcohol's effects in general. The things that it does to us and why it does it to us and what we can do about it, and when we should do it and when we shouldn't, and what reasons are there for us not to do it in the first place. A lot of stuff. So with that in mind, I'm going to go right ahead over to my and share my screen with you so you can see what I'm seeing, and we'll go to work. Oh, how'd I get there? It's supposed to be on slide 1. There we are. From the beginning. Loosening the Grip, Chapter 3, Alcohol in the Body. Y'all have the book. First the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man. Japanese proverb. In simplistic explanation for how alcohol dependency evolves in an individual, and it is an evolution through progressively worsening stages, and we'll look at that a little later on. First of all, let's try to understand that alcohol, the agent in this equation, is a drug, and people don't often think about it, or don't always think about it like that. I believe that people do think about it more that way than they have in the past, but still, alcohol is a drug. It can be absorbed without digestion. You can absorb alcohol, you can begin to absorb alcohol the minute you put it in your mouth. It begins to be absorbed through the tongue, lips, gum, etc. If you spill it in your lap, it's going to be absorbed through the skin. Once it's in the body, because it's water and lipid soluble, it can permeate membranes and tissues really easily. And it's like the quicker picker-upper. The Bounty towels. You've seen the commercial where there's a spill on the counter and the lady puts a corner of the Bounty in it, and the water crawls right up the paper towel. That's called diffusion. Alcohol, too, operates on the principle of diffusion, so that once it's in the body, alcohol goes to where alcohol is not, and it does it pretty easily. Alcohol is a food source, but it's a lousy one. Because not the drug alcohol, but the clothes it wears. If you drink beer, you're getting calories. If you drink ale, you've got calories. If you drink wine, you've got calories. If you're drinking liquor, not so much. But if you're mixing liquor with grapefruit juice, orange juice, tomato juice, Coca-Cola, whatever, you're getting calories. It's not life-sustaining. You can't stay alive on nothing but beer, although people try. Alcohol has predictable physiological affects, not reflex. Sorry about that. AFFECTS on the body, or EFFECTS is probably the better usage. It's an irritant. You know this if you've ever poured any on a burn or a cut on your body. You know this if you've ever taken a drink of strong liquor and it burns on its way down, and once it gets down in the stomach, it still has a warm feeling to it. And speaking of the stomach, alcohol causes stomach distress. It has effects on the digestive system. It promotes hyperproduction of hydrochloric acid, digestive acids. It blocks the pyloric valve and won't allow the pyloric valve to dump the stomach contents into the intestines in your and you get an upset stomach, and then you vomit, which is the body's attempt to try to get the poison out of you, because alcohol, and we'll talk about this some more later, is a poison. Behavioral effects. are linked to dosages, and that's what we're going to start with, which is blood alcohol concentration, behavior, and dosages. Once you take a drink, some drugs have to be digested to have an effect, but not ETOH. It begins to have an effect immediately, but it's not a really particularly potent drug. I mean, if you think about drinking an ounce of alcohol, and that will give you a buzz, you don't have to take anything like an ounce of heroin or an ounce of cocaine or an ounce of LSD to get an effect. You get an effect on much, much smaller dosages, so that makes them more potent drugs. And all of them have to find a way into the system to be able to create an effect. With alcohol, we usually drink it, and once we have consumed alcohol, ingested it orally, it's absorbed primarily from the small intestine. In our stomachs, we have a substance called ADH, which is a metabolic enzyme that begins to break the alcohol down immediately. But alcohol still gets absorbed, and once it's absorbed into the blood system and has a presence there, it's detectable. And we can detect that through monitoring blood alcohol levels, BAL. It's also known as BAC, or blood alcohol concentration. Don't be thrown by that. They're the same thing, BACs and BALs, and they're used to set legal levels for intoxication. A blood alcohol content of 0.08, which is 0.08 grams per 100 milliliters of blood, constitutes legal intoxication in the state of Texas. We can determine that from doing blood draws and testing the blood for alcohol content. We can do that from doing breathalyzers, and we'll talk about that later on. I'm going to show you a little thing here this morning so you don't just have to sit and listen to me hold forth. And this is Shannon Odell. She's Dr. Shannon Odell now, by the way. But she was a student when she started this. She's also a comedian, but a drunken neuroscientist who explains to you the effects of the substance that we call ethyl alcohol. I think it's going to do that. Yes, it is. Alarmed me for a moment.
I'm asking you to make a donation right now to have your gift triple matched.
No.
And help us flip the sand.
I've already donated. Forget it. Leave me alone.
Hi, my name is Shannon, and I'm a neuroscience PhD candidate. I'm here to explain to you exactly what happens to your brain as you drink. Here we go. Once swallowed, this drink travels to your stomach, where about 10% of the alcohol is absorbed, and then onto your small intestines, where the rest is absorbed into your bloodstream. As our liver can only metabolize about 15 milligrams per deciliter per hour, one drink per hour is all your body can effectively metabolize. Anything above this leads to alcohol accumulation in the bloodstream, leading to intoxication symptoms. Alcohol is metabolized in your liver by two main enzymes, alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase. First, alcohol is metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase into acetaldehyde, which is a toxic compound. Buildup of this stuff is thought to be the reason for your nasty hangover symptoms. Acetaldehyde is then metabolized by aldehyde dehydrogenase into acetic acid, also known as vinegar. When I drink, I like to think of myself as a cute little vinegar factory. After two drinks, the signs of intoxication may begin to surface. You may think it's a good idea to send that text or to insert yourself between a conversation between two strangers. But why does alcohol do this? GABA neurons are inhibitory neurons, or the stop neurons on your brain. By activating GABA receptors, alcohol works to increase firing of these stop neurons, therefore decreasing overall activity in certain areas of the brain. It doesn't stop there, though. Alcohol has the ability to squirm its way into glutamate receptors. Glutamatergic neurons are excitatory neurons, or your go neurons. So, alcohol finds another way by inhibiting these glutamatergic neurons to decrease overall brain activity in certain areas. One of these areas is the prefrontal cortex. I like to think of it as the mama movement. So, as you drink, activity of the prefrontal cortex goes down, making you less like your mom and more like your crazy aunt. But I know what you're saying. But alcohol makes me feel good. And there's a science behind that. Alcohol causes increased firing of dopamine-releasing neurons. Now, dopamine is your feel-good neurotransmitter. Dopamine also causes the reinforcing effects of alcohol, thus causing you to grab for that next drink. Bottoms up. At about 3 to 5 drinks, or a blood alcohol concentration of 50 milligrams per deciliter, additional side effects of intoxication may begin to surface. This may include incoordination or lack of balance. Now, this is due to alcohol's effects on the cerebellum. The cerebellum is in charge of coordination. It interacts with your peripheral nerves in your arms and legs to coordinate coordination. It's important to note that chronic use of alcohol can result in chronic impaired nerve damage, which can include permanent damage to nerve tissue, and causing permanent imbalance. That's bad. At 10 drinks, the signs of alcohol intoxication start to get rough, and include vomiting, nausea, anterograde amnesia, blackouts, and marked slurring of speech. Now, after 10 drinks, things get even worse, and side effects include hypothermia, hypoventilation, cardiac arrhythmia. Now, I'm no idiot, so I'm not going to do that. Never forget, alcohol is poison. You get that one?
If you manage to
Hey, what happened? Shannon is absolutely right. And that was just, I like the way she explains that. I thought you might too. The enzyme system, there's an enzyme system that generates enzymes that break down alcohol and other substances in the body. Cytochrome P450 or MEOS. Well, if you see either of those terms, they're referring to the same thing. Not too awfully long ago, the enzyme system was referred to as the microsomal ethanol oxidization system, which is the old name for it. And then some years ago, they decided to rename it as the cytochrome P450. Is the newer name for the enzyme system. But the enzyme system remains the same and works the same and is the same, so that if you run into these terms and they seem contradictory, be of good cheer and don't be confused, because they're both referring to the same system that creates, in the liver, that creates the enzymes that break down ethanol and all other alcohols for that matter, and many of the other drugs that we take into our body. As Miss Odell, Dr. Odell, pointed out earlier, ethyl alcohol, once we put it in our body, is broken down by the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase. And I put these in red so you can follow them a little better. Alcohol dehydrogenase breaks ethyl alcohol down to the substance acetaldehyde, which, as Dr. Odell pointed out, is a toxic substance, and it is, and makes you feel bad, and it plays a big role in hangover effects and other effects too. aldehyde hydrogenase breaks acetaldehyde down to acetic acid, which is the vinegar she was talking about, before it's broken down further and eliminated as H2O, water, and carbon dioxide, and CO2. It passed in the urine primarily, although alcohol is also sloughed off in sweat, saliva, breath. We get rid of it a lot of different ways. If you think about this metabolization process, this is how antabuse works, by the way. Disulfiram, the chemical, and often this is prescribed to alcohol. This is given to alcoholic drinkers who are being treated for their alcoholism, and sometimes the court forces people to take antabuse too, and to keep them from drinking. This is enforced sobriety. When we look back, let me go back one, to right here. Acetaldehyde is broken down by aldehyde hydrogenase, and this is where antabuse has its effect. It interferes right here. Aldehyde hydrogenase is blocked from breaking down acetaldehyde, which causes a sudden spike in acetaldehyde levels. And when you have sudden increased acetaldehyde levels, then you have unpleasant symptoms and extreme discomfort, high blood pressure, heart palpitations, losing control of your bowels and bladder, having a seizure, vomiting, all kinds of stuff's happening with you at that level. And these unpleasant and discomforting symptomologies keep people who are taking antabuse from drinking. You don't have to experiment with antabuse very often to know that it's no fun to drink ever while you're under this, the effects of this drug. There are people in the world, and I think they're blessed, who have this quirk naturally, and they have a real sensitivity to the effects of alcohol, and their own individual metabolism is quirky. They have a glitch where you break down acetaldehyde to acetic acid. They have spikes in their acetaldehyde levels every time they drink, and consequently, they have no fun with booze, ever. They get sick every time they drink. They don't get the pleasantries out of it that other people do. That's a shame, right? Not really. Alcohol affects every major organ system in the body once you take it in, and we'll talk about this in another chapter a little later on. But it affects the digestive system, and we don't utilize our nutrients the way we should while we're under the effects of alcohol. It causes problems with digestion and with going to the bathroom, having normal bowel movements, that kind of thing. Alcohol affects the circulatory system, and they show a picture of the heart, but the circulatory system really is the blood vessels that lead around the body in and out of the heart, too. So I guess the heart's in there, it's the pump. But the piping is also affected. We'll talk about that more in more detail later on. But if you are drinking alcohol interferes with your blood. It interferes with the blood's ability to clot. It causes you to bruise easier. If you take a drink when you're cold, you'll feel warmer. You won't be warmer because alcohol actually is just causing the surface blood vessels to dilate, and then you've got more blood at the surface and it feels warmer to you, but you're losing heat to the environment. Alcohol has indirect effects on the kidneys. It doesn't really do anything to them in most cases. It does have, there are some kidney diseases associated with alcohol use, but they're somewhat rare. But alcohol has an effect on the brain, particularly the pituitary gland, and its release of vasopressin, which is a diuretic hormone, antidiuretic hormone. And if your brain tells the kidneys, don't go, so you drink a lot of alcohol, and then the more alcohol you drink, the more it tells the kidneys, go. So you have to pee a lot more often. And in the morning after a bender, and you've been doing this, when you're taking a drug into your system that is a dehydrating drug, and you've been peeing like 3-4 times more than you normally would, you wake up dehydrated. Alcohol does bad things to the liver, and we're going to talk about the bad things such as cirrhosis, fatty infiltration, alcoholic hepatitis, and other types of hepatitis later. But right here in this particular part of the lecture, the main effect that alcohol has on the liver is upon the cytochrome P450 and those enzymes that are related with the cytochrome P450. Because we work them harder and we change tolerances through the effects that alcohol has on the liver. We get drug induction tolerances, for instance, that happens pretty quickly with people who are prone to have a drug alcohol problem. What that means is that the liver starts to hyperproduce the MEOS enzymes, the ethanol oxidization enzymes, the alcohol dehydrogenase, aldehyde dehydrogenase, etc. Consequently, this increases a person's tolerance. It means that in a relatively short time, the same dose of the alcohol has a lessened effect because the enzymes are marshaled and all systems are go to metabolize it more quickly. The cytochrome P450, same as the MEOS, is also responsible for breaking down other enzymes. I'm fumbling my words. I only have coffee in my cup. But these enzyme systems are also responsible for breaking down other substances and presences of other substances. Say if you're taking penicillin, the same MEOS enzymes, the same cytochrome P450 enzymes that are responsible for breaking down alcohol and are there in are hyperactive, really, because of the presence of alcohol in the system, are also responsible for breaking down things like penicillin and erythromycin, antibiotics. So they break them down quicker, and they don't work as well. So if you're taking antibiotics, you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. Actually, you shouldn't be drinking alcohol with any drugs, but we'll talk about that a little later today. In practical applications, I had a client one time that I had to put in the hospital to get him over gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is eminently treatable with antibiotics, but not if you wash it down with a fifth of liquor. So consequently, he wasn't able to stay sober long enough for his antibiotics to kick in to clear up the gonorrhea that he had, and he had to be hospitalized for alcohol dependency, but also to get over the clap. In the brain, we're going to talk about that at length a little later on, but the brain and the central nervous system and all the nerves going in and out of the nervous system are affected by the use of alcohol. And you'll remember that in order for a drug to be psychoactive, it's got to get into the bloodstream, it's got to get to the brain, it's got to cross the blood-brain barrier, and it's got to do something once it's in there. It's got to alter ongoing neurochemical processes in the brain in order for us to get a high from it. And there are other organ systems, the skin, the blood, the skeletal system. But we'll talk more about that later. BALs become important, BACs, in as much as you understand that you have a certain concentration of alcohol in the blood. If you take more than one drink, and Dr. Shannon told you, if you drink more than one drink in an hour, alcohol does what? It accumulates. This is called an additive effect. You stack one drink on top of another drink. So if you have one drink in an hour, say you have a drink at 9 o'clock this morning, it's too early to be drinking, but let's say you do anyway. Then by 10 o'clock, you're good to go. That drink has worn off. You finished your drink at 9 o'clock. But if you have two drinks at 9 o'clock, then by 10 o'clock, you have one drink active in your system. If you have three drinks at 9 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, you have two drinks active in your system. If you have four drinks at 9 o'clock, then by 10 o'clock you have three drinks active in your system. Your blood alcohol level increases with dosage. The faster you drink and the more you drink in a shorter period of time, it leads to greater impairment because of increased BALs. You can drink enough alcohol to risk overdose and other toxicity type effects. Acute alcohol toxemia can kill you. It doesn't usually, it's usually something else that gets you, but it can. If you drink enough alcohol quickly, some weird things happen to you. Shannon mentioned anterograde amnesia, also known as alcoholic palimpsest, also known as blackouts. And in my experience, people, when they come in to talk to you, when your clients come in to talk to you, they'll use these terms, but they'll use them inappropriately. Like I was at this party and I had too much to drink, so I blacked out on the couch. That's not that. Blacking out is amnesia. It's drug-induced amnesia. It's current inability to recall things that you engaged in or that happened to you or that you witnessed or whatever while you were drunk. It's losing periods of time out of your life. And this has to do with, it's a dose-related phenomenon that has to do entirely with drinking. And other drugs, too, can cause blacking out, can cause anterograde amnesia. Sometimes these memories come back to you, and sometimes they don't. I've seen some hypotheticals where you don't really... the memories are still inside you, but it's a computer. Think about it this way. Your brain's a computer, and you experience things while you're intoxicated, and you save it in a file marked effed up, and you can't get it out because you don't know how to access the file. But if you go back to that effed up condition, you can access your effed up file. That makes sense. I wouldn't recommend that. Passing out is an entirely different thing. Passing out is a drug-induced coma, and you can drink enough alcohol to where your body can't handle it anymore, and the brain tends to shut down, and so you go into a coma. Alcohol, remember, is an anesthetic. You drink enough of that and go into that alcoholic coma, the passing out, and Leatherface could drop by and take your leg off without waking you up. The amount of alcohol that it takes to put you in that anesthetic state, and the amount that it takes to kill you, is infinitesimal. And I'm not trying to scare anyone, but if you ever go under general anesthesia, there's no such thing as minor surgery if you're under general anesthesia. That's as close as you're ever going to get to being dead and come back from it. they knock you down so far that people can cut on you for hours without you feeling a thing. Remarkable and terrifying at the same time. Generally, if you're going to die because you ingested too much alcohol, you're going to die. Well, generally, you're going to die from misadventure. You're going to try to swim the San Jacinto River or drive your car or pet a bear, that kind of stuff. But directly related to alcohol overdose, the way you die, and people who do this are folks who are usually not making good choices anyway. They're playing drinking games, they're doing shots, they're taking 21 drinks for their 21st birthday, that kind of thing. And it can cause people to go down. Alcohol overdose is not always a terrifically dramatic thing. A Baytown kid died of it. It's been a while back. It may have been 15 years or more, I guess. Long time ago. A kid went to Sam Houston Teachers College, and he was living up there, and he went to a frat party and drank too much, and he laid down on the couch and passed out. And when people went to rouse him, he wasn't just passed out, he was dead. And he died of respiratory arrest, which is alcohol overdose that results in shutting down the part of the brain, that's the old brain around the brainstem, that controls breathing. And he suffocated. If this happens to a drinker and there's no one there to rescue them, to give them CPR, to help them come out of that, then they'll likely die. And even if there is someone there to rescue them, depending on how long they were passed out, how long the brain was deprived of oxygen, how much anoxia or cell death has occurred from lack of oxygen in the brain, if they do come back, they'll come back a changed person. The second way that people tend to die with alcohol overdose is they pass out, vomit, and drown in the vomit, which is not particularly glamorous, huh? Field sobriety test. Once you have rising blood alcohol contents, and it begins to affect you in the ways that Dr. Odell, that Shannon described. You stagger, you slur your words, your coordination is down. So they can, policemen like this guy here, can give folks a sobriety test, a field sobriety test, and decide whether they are too impaired to be driving right there on the side of the road. That can be challenging. Some of the stuff that they want you to do, I can't do stone cold sober, just saying. But anyway, this is a field sobriety test.
So what do you do when your computer crashes and all those memories you've been storing for years are wiped out?
There we go.
I'm great. I'm doing okay. I'm not so good because you were weaving all over the road there. Well, today one thing's great. I've been drinking. Okay. Right hand to the nose. Yeah. With the left hand. Right. And back out. I need you to recite the alphabet from Z to A backwards as fast as you can. Z to A? Yeah. Sure. Z. Y, X, W, V, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Remarkable. I've actually never seen anybody do that. I'm not worried about your bladder right now. Sure. Yeah. All right. All right, well, you got a pretty good balance.
Thank you.
I want you to step up, step up, up, step up, step up, up. 5, 6, 7, 8. Step up, step up, up, step up, step up, up. Hover away, kickball change, step back. 5, 6, 7, 8.
You know what would be good is if you hit kick and then you did that in a barrel turn and then you know, that would be
That's really good. You a dancer?
no, I'm just drunk.
Up against the vehicle right now.
I'm just drunk.
There is a huge fundraising deadline coming up for Senate Democrats, and they
Oh my goodness. Seriously, there's nothing funny about intoxication. It's a dangerous state of being. And still today, if you're running around out here in beautiful southeast Texas, in Harris County, you're in the most dangerous place in America and where you're most likely to be involved in an alcohol-related car crash. You're most likely to be injured in an alcohol-related car crash, and you're more likely to be killed in an alcohol-related car crash in Harris County, Texas, than anywhere else in America. And so drunks have been played for laughs over the years, but you have to be careful what you laugh at. We saw Charlie Chaplin in there and Shannon O'Dell. And although, there are some comical situations that people may find themselves in, intoxication isn't one of them. And certainly alcoholism isn't. We'll talk about that later too. Factors that may affect intoxication: how old you are, as your weight, how big you are, gender, and gender has to do with size too. I mean, guys are usually bigger than girls, and if you're pouring alcohol into a container, alcohol is in the container, fills up more of a 1 gallon bucket than it does a 5 gallon bucket. Men have more ADH, alcohol dehydrogenase, in our stomachs than women do usually, so we begin to break it down faster. There are water and fat distributions that vary from men to women, and so that has an effect on how we feel alcohol. Women have different hormonal fluctuations than men do. We both have them, but they're different. Consequently, a premenstrual woman will have a different alcohol effect than if she is menstrual at the time she's drinking or if she's just recently post-menstrual. So there'll be differences with that. Other factors too. And we'll talk about that more in alcohol's effect on the body. I mean, more in the medical chapter on the medical consequences of drinking. Individual health, there are some diseases, some illnesses that, will create a sensitivity to alcohol or a sensitivity to the deleterious effects of alcohol. And then there's individual metabolism and tolerance levels, which vary from individual to individual. And they too predict different outcomes for a drinker. By the way, and this is kind of something that was in that we'll talk about some more in discussions of Alcoholics Anonymous in the Big Book. There's a number of references throughout the Big Book about how puzzled the drinker is because they can't handle alcohol like other people do, and how puzzled the non-alcoholics are looking at an alcoholic, and they can't understand why they can't handle alcohol the way that other people do. And so both groups, both the chemically dependent individuals and the non-chemically dependent individuals are puzzled by the drinker's behavior. Why can't I handle it? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do what other people do? Why can't, if I'm allergic to strawberries, I might have pity parties, but why I can't enjoy what other people seem to enjoy with impunity? Science gives us some answers, where for a long while the answer was because. Why does it do this? Because. I don't know, but it does. And so because it does, you have to modify your behavior to fit that reality. Breathalyzer. Oh boy, I love these things. The breathalyzer now is a little handheld device. See that policeman there getting that young man who apparently was on the motorcycle to blow into the breathalyzer. Breathalyzer will measure in just a few minutes what your BAC, BAL is. It'll kick it back, and if it's 0.08 or higher, you may go to jail. Actually, you can go to jail if it's lower than that in some places, but it's not a DUI, it's an impaired driving or something charge, but it's different from different states. In the United States, 0.08 is the standard. It's the BAL level that constitutes legal intoxication in all of the states and territories. It blows into the machine. You probably don't get that unless you watch Silence of the Lambs, which measures metabolites per cubic centimeter of expelled breath and formulates a very accurate BAL. So that if we were to give you the breathalyzer and you said, I dispute that, and we take a blood draw at the same time, they'll come out pretty much identical. There won't be much, if any, difference between the two. More likely, no difference at all. But here's the rub. It does not, the breathalyzer does not measure the relative funkiness of one's breath. So if you're chewing gum or tobacco or trying to use mouthwash, and mouthwash isn't a good idea anyway since it mostly contains alcohol, or breath mints or eating an onion or chewing your socks or whatever the hell you're trying to do to disguise your breath isn't going to work, because what's being measured is metabolites that are present in expelled lung gas. So when you breathe out after you've been drinking, you're sloughing off the alcohol. And the BALs are detectable in that sloughed breath. Tolerance. Again, this is important when you start looking at BALs one more time. Tolerance is the decreased amount to the same, decreased response to the same amount of a drug over time. So that when you first start drinking and you have a can or two of beer or a six-pack of beer or whatever, it produces an effect in you. And if you're a beginning drinker, the effect can be pretty profound. If it's not profound, if there are a bunch of us start drinking in here, if this class starts drinking and everybody has a pint of whiskey and almost everyone is staggering, slurring, falling down, barfing, and me and two others of you are saying, well, let's go dancing. It's time to party. We're the abnormal ones in the room. We have a high tolerance. If we are beginning drinkers and we have high tolerances, that predicts the likelihood of a drinking problem down the road, because we have to drink more than other people to get where other people go. 0.08% then will manifest differently with varying tolerances. If someone is a heavy drinker who drinks a lot and has drug acquisition tolerance, for instance, the enzymes are always ready and there's pretty much a constant presence of alcohol in the system, they may not appear nearly as intoxicated with that blood level, as will an infrequent drinker with 0.08. I'm not sure if I brought it up in here before, but I might as well now. I'm very reluctant to go out on New Year's Eve, for instance, because it's amateur night out there. And I'm on the road with intoxicated people every time I get on the road. So are you, by the way. But on New Year's, we got people who don't drink and drive much. And know what they're doing? Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're out there drinking and driving. And we're getting better at this. I mean, no kidding, as a culture, people are less likely to do that stuff than before, but they're still out there. And someone who is not used to drinking and has and has an infrequent blood alcohol level that's up that high, they can be really dangerous. A machine gun can be dangerous in anyone's hand, but if you hand it to a chimpanzee, it's really dangerous. Know what I'm saying? So you don't want to give a monkey a machine gun. And people who are not used to driving or drink, who are not used to drinking and driving are really dangerous. They're not really monkey with a machine gun dangerous, but they're not far off. There are other problems that are associated with alcohol ingestion too. As Shannon noted, alcohols are poison. Did you get that? All alcohols are poisonous. There are no exceptions. So what happens if you drink other alcohols? Glad you asked. We're going to talk about that. Ethyl alcohol is the least poisonous of all the other alcohols. Butanol is much more poisonous. Isopropanol, methanol, all of these other alls are more poisonous alcohols than ethanol. So we can drink more ethanol without dying than we can of these other substances. Remember the alcohol metabolization? Ethyl alcohol is broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH, to the substance acetaldehyde, etc. Well, here's a new formula. Methyl alcohol is broken down by the same enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase, but it's broken down to the substance formaldehyde, which, by the way, is embalming fluid. And it's the stuff that, in high school biology that they pickle the pig fetuses in. Formaldehyde is broken down by the enzyme aldehyde dehydrogenase to the substance formic acid. This is a destructive process to the human body, as the metabolites are more toxic in the system than the substances from which they're derived. That's not really all that uncommon when we start looking at some of the other intoxicants that are used out there. For instance, the magic mushroom that grows in the cow pastures around here has a hallucinogenic substance in it called psilocybin. So when you pick your magic mushrooms and you render it down to tea, or you eat it, or you whatever you do to get it in you, and your body begins to metabolize psilocybin, the first stage metabolite of psilocybin is an active metabolite, which is quite common with substances that are being broken down. The first stage active metabolite from psilocybin is psilocin, which in itself is a much more powerful hallucinogenic than psilocybin is. But because it's broken down from psilocybin, it's usually there in lesser amount. Formaldehyde is a toxic substance. It's much more toxic than the ethyl alcohol. The formic acid is a toxic substance, less toxic than the formaldehyde, but still more toxic than the methyl alcohol. So you've got all these components that are floating around in your body doing destructive things. So that essentially, instead of detoxifying the body by breaking down the other alcohols, the process of metabolization when you're ingesting other types of alcohol, such as methanol, serves to intensify the toxic reactions. And since we are talking about ethanol, I might add at this point, and may come back to it later, that methanol metabolizes a lot slower than ethanol does. So that this is a process that takes it's a longer process. It takes hours longer. And because of that lengthier process, your body has a lengthier time of exposure to these toxic elements, and lengthier times of exposure creates more physiological damage over time. One of the key damages that you get from formaldehyde, which can be used and is used on its own as a drug of abuse, by the way, is that when you ingest it orally like you do, when methyl alcohol is ingested orally and the metabolic process creates formaldehyde, then that formaldehyde attacks components of the body. And one of the components of the body that it attacks are the eyes. A common occurrence, well, I wouldn't call it common, but a not uncommon occurrence that happened during Prohibition was people getting bad alcohol, methyl alcohol. And methyl alcohol breaks down to formaldehyde, and formaldehyde destroys the optic nerve so that when you come out of this, you're blind. That's where we get an expression called blind drunk, by the way. This isn't a temporary condition. Once you're blind from the ingestion of methyl alcohol, you're blind forever. You never see again. The optic nerve is destroyed. Eye damage, nerve damage, other tissue damage, all very likely when you're ingesting other types of alcohol. So it's a good idea not to. But because this takes a long time and it takes relatively high levels and exposures to create these bad outcomes, if someone is hospitalized with methyl alcohol poisoning or methyl alcohol overdose, however you want to refer to it, one of the treatments is to give them ethyl alcohol. Give them whiskey. Put the ethyl alcohol in them. This doesn't seem like it would make sense. This seems kind of counterintuitive that you treat an alcohol overdose with more alcohol. Yes, for this reason. The cytochrome P450, remember that? The one that creates the enzymes that break it down? The enzymes that are created by the cytochrome P450, the alcohol dehydrogenase and the aldehyde hydrogenase, has preferential, I don't know if enzymes can really have preferences, but I think about it that way. They prefer to break down methyl alcohol. They have a greater affinity towards breaking down ethyl alcohol than they do the methyl. This means that they stretch that lengthy time of metabolization for the methyl alcohol out even further. But when they're stretching out the length of time that it takes to metabolize this substance away, they are creating lengthier exposures to the toxins, but they're creating much, much reduced levels of the toxin because the methyl alcohol is not being broken down as quickly. The ethyl alcohol is. And so you can stretch that out to where people can recover without much residual or long-term damage. Formaldehyde is a embalming fluid. It's a drug of abuse. When it's used apart from when it's used as a drug on its own, we call it wet or water. It's a CNS depressant. Generally, the way it's used is you dunk a cigarette in it, or you pour it on a joint, dunk a joint in it, and smoke it, and it will get you pretty high, in a drunken sense, in the same sense that alcohol would get you high. It creates the same sort of high. When you use it when you smoke it, it doesn't cause as much damage to the optic nerve because the formaldehyde is being broken down from formaldehyde. So when you take the formaldehyde in, first stage metabolites, what? Yeah, you're right, formic acid. And so it changes the formula. Blindness can ensue if you consumed methyl alcohol, isopropyl butanol, and all that good stuff, and so can death. Death can ensue with any alcohol or alcohol metabolite. Government poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Have you heard that rumor? It's not a rumor, it's the truth. They knew that industrial alcohols, medicinal alcohols, were not illegal. They could be procured. And sometimes with bootleggers, manufacturers of illegal alcohol, they would use methanol or isopropanol to create their products, their bathtub gin and what have you. The government knew this was a possibility, so they put toxic substances into industrial alcohol so that it couldn't be turned into a beverage. Good idea, right? Yeah, except it wasn't, because these poisoned alcohols were turned into beverages, and around 10,000 Americans died from it, and umpteen thousands more were injured by it, and had the rest of their lives affected by the injuries that they sustained by it. Better living through chemistry, huh? But it's not just the agent, it's not just the drug that creates problems for us. Very often our problems arise from the host too. Expectations of alcohol. Remember what we talked about in chapter 2. Makes you prettier, wittier, tittier, smarter, taller, a better dancer, a sexual dynamo, a world-class warrior. Fill in the blanks. You know all of the wonderful things that alcohol will do for you and how it will improve you as a person and improve your status in society and improve your abilities to mate and relate and date and all kinds of things. No, alcohol makes you drunk. And not only does it make you drunk, it makes you much less able to read the intents of other people. And trouble happens when when you have that mommy part of the brain that Shannon talked about, the prefrontal lobe of the cerebral cortex. When you put to sleep that part of your brain that gives it down, and then you throw yourself into an altered state where you're interacting with other people, what could possibly go wrong, right? And there are reasons and there are circumstances that people shouldn't drink. And here are some. This is not a comprehensive list, by the way, but we'll talk about that later. People who were already intoxicated should not have more to drink, because that increases the risk of an acute alcohol toxicity event, an overdose. And actually, intoxication is kind of an overdose situation. If you've had too much to drink, you've had too much to drink. People under the age of 25 shouldn't use alcohol. Did I hear some brakes right there? People were following me along and went, wait a damn minute. What do you mean people under the age of 25 shouldn't be able to drink alcohol? I didn't say that. I said that people under the age of 25 should not use alcohol. And because under the age of 25, your brain's still developing, and alcohol interferes with normal brain development. That's all. Just science. That's it. No moral judgment here. Oh, wait a minute. I know there's 3 of you. I heard you. That say, wait a minute. I dispute that. You can join the army when you're 18. If you're old enough to fight for your country, you're old enough to drink. To which I say, bullshit. One has nothing to do with the other. I'm talking about a physiological thing that's going on here, not a decision to join the army. By the way, when I was 18, they had a draft, and I had to register for it, and I was freaked out because I didn't want to go kill people in Southeast Asia. That's just me, me and Donald John Trump. We didn't want to go. I didn't have any bone spurs, though. I had a broken leg with a rod in it, and that kept me out. But, you know, I remember what Congresswoman Pat Schroeder from Colorado said when she was arguing that we should abolish the draft, which eventually we did. She said we target kids when we draft people. We draft people who are 18 years old. And the reason that we draft people when they're 18 years old is that is the only demographic that we can convince that they can run at a bullet and win, which is, there's a good deal of truth in that. Usually by the time a person's in their 20s, they're going, I don't know about this, I want to be an airborne ranger stuff. Anyway, people under the age of 25 still have a developing brain. Physiologically, it's not a good idea to start drinking at that time. The longer we can postpone people starting drug use as they're growing up until they reach maturity, the less likely you are to have a substance abuse problem. The older you are when you start, the less likely it is to be a problem. And that's across the board. So, just saying, we can argue about that some more if y'all want to. Pregnant women should not use alcohol, period. The end, over. No discussion. Epileptics should not use alcohol. You take alcohol and drug abuse out of the mix, you knock down a huge percentage of epileptics. Lots of people, well over 50%, drug themselves into epilepsies. And we also should be counting those who are intoxicated and fall down and smack their heads and get in car wrecks and get shot and get beaten up, etc. and so forth. That also leads to epilepsies. So if you have a seizure disorder, you should not drink, not even a little. Not now, not ever. Diabetics, type 1, type 2, doesn't matter. If you're diabetic, you should not drink. Not a little bit, not a lot, not now, not occasionally, not ever. You shouldn't drink if you have diabetes. Anyone recovering from an injury or illness should not drink. Anyone taking medications should not drink for these reasons. One, if you're hurt, if you're burned, if you have a broken leg, if you've had surgery or whatever, alcohol plays with your immune system. If you drink alcohol, then your immune system is not functioning at optimum speed, so to speak. And if your immune system isn't functioning, then its ability to help you heal isn't functioning either. And so alcohol interferes with that entire process. It's one of the reasons that you see people who are heavy drinkers, they get bruised, and the bruise takes months to heal. It's on them weeks longer than it is for people who don't drink. Cuts, weeks longer to heal than it does for people who don't drink. We get things like the flu or a cold, and it sticks with us and it sticks with us and it sticks with us because we're drinkers and we can't fight it off. If you're taking other medications, you shouldn't drink, not just because alcohol will interfere with the operation or the therapeutic effect that we want to get out of the medications, and we don't want that. We want them to function optimally to help us get well better faster, right? But it not only does that, interferes with that, but there are some serious complications that can occur if you take medications while you're drinking with an alcohol and drug interaction, many of which can kill you. So you want to avoid that too. When you talk about alcohol and other drug interactions, and we've already talked about this a little bit, you're talking about the liver again, the cytochrome P450 again. It's, the drug induction tolerances that are related to the amounts of metabolic enzymes that are produced by this system. They're slowed in infrequent drinkers, so that if people aren't often drinkers, are are infrequent drinkers, they don't drink often, then they don't drink much when they do, then they have a stronger effect by the alcohol. And one of the reasons is because the microsomal enzymes are not produced at high levels. But metabolization and production of metabolic enzymes is accelerated in heavy drinkers because the liver has to work harder and more often in order to produce those enzymes. Consequently, the higher levels of enzymes break the substances down faster. And you can factor this in any way you want to when you're looking at alcohol mixed with other drugs in lights of who's doing the drinking, a heavy drinker or an infrequent drinker. But in both cases, there is an effect, and it can be measured and explained. Also, when you're doing other drug interactions with alcohol, sometimes these other drugs aren't really other drugs. For instance, diazepam or Valium. Diazepam is a family of minor tranquilizers, of minor CNS depressants known as benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines are usually not considered particularly dangerous drugs, although there are some that are. And benzodiazepines by themselves, you don't see a lot of people overdosing on them, taking enough Valium, Librium, Xanax, to reach overdose levels. It does happen, but not that often. However, when you are washing it down with Jim Beam or Seven Crown or Jose Tecate or Jose Cuervo or Tecate beer or any of that stuff, then you have an increased risk for a toxic response or an overdose situation arising from that. Remember, additive is 1 drink per hour. Your body can handle it okay without any real intoxication events usually, or serious ones. 2 drinks an hour. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus another one is 3, plus another one is 4, and it stacks. And you can only subtract 1 an hour from that. So however many you stack up, if you have 8 drinks in an hour, then the next 7 hours you're going to be, reducing that 1 drink at a time till you're back to manageable. That's additive effects. That is an alcohol accumulation effect. When you're mixing substances like taking Seconal and alcohol or taking cocaine and heroin, washing it down with alcohol, when you're mixing these drugs, you get synergistic effects. And synergistic effects are multiplicative effects. So 2 Valiums and 2 beers don't equal, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. Because these are the same types of drugs, central nervous system depressants, operating in the same part of the brain, they potentiate the effects of one another. In other words, they multiply the effects. So 2 plus 2 equals 9 or 10 or 27, depending on the individual, and you can get in real trouble real fast doing this. There are also other problems associated with the use of ethanol. It's a factor in transmittable diseases. And this is things that are generally bloodborne pathogens that we can pass on from one to the other. And where alcohol intoxication has its primary effect with transmittable diseases is in making bad decisions. You do things while you're intoxicated. You choose to do things. You engage in activities that if you were sober and in your right mind, you might not engage in. So I'm doing this in my garage, so you hear the passing garbage trucks occasionally and things like that. Beg your pardon, but it's a lot quieter out here than it is in my house, usually on a Saturday. I hear a lawnmower somewhere too. There's no joke. What does the drunken cheerleader say after sex? No answer? You boys all on the same team? You make bad decisions. You go home with people you shouldn't go home with. If you're a drug user, other drug user, you may decide that, hey, this person looks pretty healthy. They don't look sick to me. I don't really need to, I can use their needle with them. They look okay. And no, that's not a good idea. So, transmittable diseases. And remember, too, that when we're exposed to a bloodborne pathogen, or we're exposed to a virus, or we're exposed to bacteria while we're under the effects of alcohol, while we're intoxicated, our body is that less likely to fight it off. And if we have a healthy immune system, we may be able to. Alcohol figures, again, as a date rape drug, sexual assault. People are, if you take someone who's drunk, and this will be a male, very rarely would it be a female, but you take a guy who's drunk, I may mistake I may mistake the cues that I'm getting from another person. I may think someone looking at me wants to fight with me, for instance. I may also think that someone looking at me may want to fornicate with me, and that may not be the case. And because I have increased driving behavior, I'm more aggressive, and because my ability to read cues is depleted, and because my ability to have good decisions made, and because I don't have the wherewithal to pull myself up because my inhibition levels are off the table, sexual assault can happen. I'm not saying this to excuse anyone. Anyone who does sexual assault is guilty of sexual assault, but there are a lot of factors that can lead up to sexual assault. One of the things that we'll talk about in some other classes is, there are cases, and I'm not negating this, don't hear that by any stretch of the imagination, where it has been ruled, and this is precedent, the legal precedent's been set, that someone who is intoxicated cannot give permission for sexual behavior. In other words, if my girl that I'm with tonight is drunk and I say, do you wanna, and she lifts her head and bobs it around and I take that for a yes, that's not really consent because she's in an altered state. Also, if I've dropped a little Rohypnol in her drink, that creates an altered state. She cannot consent to sex under those circumstances. If your date's comatose, that's not consent, guys, just in case you're wondering. Sexual assault occurs, and it does occur there. When both people are under the influence of alcohol, when both people are out of their minds or technically insane for that period of time and decide to do something anyway, it gets a little tougher to knock out who the victim is and what happened there. But it leads to complications. Other complications that you may find with people who are associated with alcohol use is otherwise sudden and unexpected natural death. Now, and I'm excluding from this the situation that we talked about in chapter 2, the last words of the redneck, hold my beer and watch this. Death from misadventure, doing something totally stupid and dying because you did that is different. But strokes, heart attacks, stopping breathing, there are all kinds of things that can happen that would be ruled by a coroner to be a natural death. And there's higher risk for these sudden and unexpected natural deaths among drinkers than they are among non-drinkers. That's all. Routes of administration are important for drug use, and that's with alcohol too. How you take a substance is going to affect how intense the high is going to be, how quick the high is, how long it may last, etc. Dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, is a hallucinogenic drug that's taken from the cahaba tree in South America, and it's powdered bark, actually. It's not very effective if you eat it. You don't get a discernible high. But if you powder this bark and snort it, insufflate it, then it produces an intense hallucinogenic experience. Short-lived, though. It only lasts about an hour. That's called the businessman's acid, or the businessman's trip, because you can do it at lunch and still be back by 1 o'clock to close the deal, you know. So if you insufflate it or inject it, then it's intense, but doing it any other way, not so much. So the ways that you get a drug into your body is important. If you're taking pills or something and you eat a drug, take some bars, drop a few roofies, whatever, and you change your mind. You've just eaten these. You change your mind. You don't want to do this after all. You freak out a little bit. All it takes is a finger down your throat and bring them back up again. When you get them out of your body before they're broken down and absorbed, you're good to go. But ingestion, and you're intending to keep the drug in you and continuing and want to have an effect from it, the drug's at the mercy of digestive acids in the stomach. Different people are going to break it down at different rates. Some of it will be absorbed, some of it will be absorbed, but it'll be different from me to you to the person next to you, etc., because of our individual metabolisms and things like that. And the amount of metabolic enzymes that are present in our system to deal with it in the stomach, etc. Insufflation. This is different from inhalation, by the way. Insufflation is snorting. The cahaba snuff is a powder. You blow it into your nose, or you suck it into your nose, depending on how you want to do it. If you got a witch doctor to do it for you, he blows it into your nose. If you have to suck it in yourself, you do it. When you snort cocaine, you're not inhaling cocaine into the lungs. You're snorting cocaine up into the mucous membranes of the nasal passages and the sinuses. You can do that with a lot of different drugs. You can do that with heroin. You can do it with methamphetamine. You can do it with cahaba. You can do it with all kinds of stuff. And it's absorbed through the mucous membranes, these wet tissues that are in the front of your face. When you inhale a drug, that's different from insufflation. You have turned the drug into a gaseous form. You've taken that tobacco and the nicotine and acetaldehyde that's contained in that tobacco and all the other chemicals, the tars and things that are in that tobacco, you set it on fire and you've turned it into a gas. You do the same with weed. You turn it into a gas and then you inhale the gas. And when you take an inhalation and you bring it into your lungs, the gas is absorbed through the lungs and goes directly into the bloodstream into the brain, because your lungs are about oxygenating the organs, and one of the organs that demands the most oxygen is the brain. So when we take a breath, that inhalation is passed out of the lungs into the bloodstream, goes to the brain, and boom. If it's got nicotine in it, if it's got opium in it, if it's got heroin in it, if it's got, whatever in it, whatever the drug happens to be, then we get a bolus dosage every time we inhale. Every time we take a puff of a cigarette, nicotine is taken from the lungs into the bloodstream and fired at the brain like a skyrocket. And that nicotine goes up into the brain where it explodes, boom, and we get our effect. It binds at certain neurons, creates activity in neurotransmission, etc., and we actually get a high out of that. We get a payoff every time we take a puff of a cigarette, every time we take a hit of a joint, every time we take a puff of a Texas Shine Boy sprayed into a bread bag. We get a hit and we get a bolus dosage. That's inhalation. It's also a very, very fast way to get the drug into your system, and it's almost as fast as direct ingestion. In some cases, faster than direct ingestion. Then there's parenteral absorption. That's absorption through the skin when you get drugs on you. And there's a big hoop-de-doo right now of people worried about fentanyl and exposure to fentanyl, because you could overdose on fentanyl just getting it on your skin. And fentanyl is a very powerful synthetic pain reliever, and it's an opiate because it's an entirely chemical rendering of an opioid that you get from natural sources. Opioids are natural, opiates are synthetic. So the opiate is a powerful opiate, and they can put it on patches, and they do put it on patches. My brother, who died of cancer a few years back, had a huge supply of opiate patches, fentanyl patches, that he wore to combat the pain, to decrease the pain. So it can be absorbed through the skin. Other drugs too. You can take a drug rectally. A bum rush, a butt chug, a boofing. That all refers to people who are taking doses of alcohol rectally. When, the kids in junior high are walking around with an alcohol soaked tampon stuffed up their butt, they're getting a high from that. They're getting a butt chug. Well, butt chugs are different. They're getting a bum rush. Butt chugs occur when you take basically a siphon, a hose, and a I forget what you call the things. You take siphon hose and the round thing that you pour into, and pour it into. You basically put alcohol in an enema bag and squirt it up your butt. This will get you high. It gets you real high. It doesn't take as much alcohol to get you high as it does if you're drinking it, because you totally bypass the breakdown system that occurs from taking it in the other end. You don't get the ADH that's in the stomachs. That's not an issue. There is no ADH available to the lower intestine and that area. So if you're boofing or doing a butt chug, then you're getting pretty high doses of alcohol, and people can die from this. A lady in League City, just up the road from me, died because she had, killed her boyfriend. And she didn't mean to, or at least she says she didn't mean to. I don't really know. But he wanted her to give him an alcohol enema, and she did. She prepared him an enema the way he wanted it prepared, and she stuck it in his ass, and she gave it to him, and he overdosed on alcohol, and he died. And so local law enforcement wanted to charge her with murder or whatever, and she got manslaughter, but it was the eventual charge, but she got off on it. She didn't mix it. He mixed it. He made the mixture, and he could have done it for himself, but he wanted her to do it. This kind of thing isn't done in my circle, but anyway, that's however that went down. It went down, and he died. This is dangerous. There is argument today, and I hear both sides of it, that if you do boofing or butt chugs, that you won't have alcohol on your breath, but you will, because one of the ways that you get rid of alcohol when you metabolize it is through breath. It won't be as strong because you won't have had it around your mouth, you won't have gotten it into your lungs that way. But when you're metabolizing alcohol and throwing it off, you do it by breathing as well as urination and whatnot, sweating. Inconsequential, really, but you will not beat a breathalyzer test because you did a bum rush or a butt chug. It'll still pop you on the metabolites that are being sloughed off through the lungs. Injection is where you have your most rapid onset if you do intravenous injection. It's not as fast if you're doing subcutaneous or intramuscular. But when you have a syringe with a drug in it, this is where you not only tend to have the most rapid onset, but it's easier to control the dosage. Now, this is something that's really a big deal, and it's easier to control the effects of the substance. You can, if you have a predictable and controlled source of the substance, and by that I mean you don't know buying street drugs about purity. You just don't. You'll get one from this guy, get a bump from this guy, and it's a higher purity than the bump you got from that guy. And so there's problems with that. If you're buying a street drug, everyone who touches it has stomped it. And by stomping, I mean they've cut it with something and to increase their profit margin mainly. My brothers used to take a pound of marijuana and a good sun-dried cow patty from out at across where they kept the cows near my mother's house. And, a good sun-dried cow patty that's been out there a long time has been digested through multiple stomachs, and it comes out that grass comes out very finely ground up, and it doesn't smell like anything. So you can turn a pound of marijuana into 2 pounds of marijuana pretty easily just by putting it in a bigger baggie and shaking it. My brothers would sell you weed, but they wouldn't kiss you after you smoked it. Just saying. Anyway, it's easier to control dosage. If you're getting what you think you're getting. A lot of people who use injectables, they start with skin popping. And I don't see anyone who does that much anymore, but I don't remember when I've seen anyone who has done skin popping. But that's injecting it subcutaneously, just under the dermal layer of the skin. You're not going deep, you're not hitting veins, you're just putting it into the tissue underneath the skin. And a lot of heroin users started this way back in the day. Not so much nowadays. But subcutaneous is skin popping, sticking it right on the skin. Intramuscular is usually a deeper injection. And we do this with viscous substances. Like if you're taking penicillin, it comes flowing out kind of thick. And they'll give it to you deep in a muscle. And that muscle will be sore for a couple of days. But there's a good absorption rate from intramuscular injection because there's a heavy blood flow inside the muscles. And with some drugs, you give it intramuscularly because if you do that, there's less tissue damage than if you were to do it subcutaneously or intravenously. And some substances have a real ugly effect. You can get abscesses and scarring and collapsed veins and things like that, which is a common problem with injectable drug addicts, IBDUs. The fastest way of getting an effect from the drug is through intravenous mainlining directly into a vein. If you've gone under anesthesia, then you know how quick this can be, really. Generally, if I'm going in for a surgery, they've given me a drug to mellow me out, right? And this is the drug that is supposed to relieve my anxiety, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself and everything. And my anesthesiologist and my nurses too, they're all so pretty, and the girls too. And then we're in the room, and the anesthesiologist tells me, all right, I'm going to give you this. Count backwards from 100. And I'll go 100, 99, 98. And then it's like the end of a Looney Tunes cartoon. That's all, folks. Whoop! And it immediately goes black. That fast. That's how fast you get hit with this stuff and how fast your body reacts. Each method of introduction has an upside and a downside. Come on, go ahead here. There's risks of overdose with injectables, risk of impurities with injectables, risk of transmissible diseases, risks of tissue damage. Same if you're doing rectal things. If you're sticking things up your butt and you're not sure about what they are necessarily, problems can ensue. Snorting stuff. We had a young girl die in Baytown some years back because she had crushed up some bars, some Xanax, and inhaled that. She got high for sure, but she also got a sinus infection that turned into a brain infection, and it infected the meningeal layer of the brain. So what she did, she gave herself meningitis, and she did not survive it because she put this stuff in her nose. Kind of makes you wonder too, huh? Who would have thought? Whoever was the first person who thought, let's stick this in our nose. That will be cool. We'll get some. Let's stick it in our butt. That'll be cool too. I don't know. Man, technology, and inventions constantly baffles me. Some things from observation. We'll talk a little later in some other classes about Amanita muscaria, the magic mushroom of the Arctic Circle among the Laplanders. And I'm pretty sure that they observed this from reindeer who would eat the mushroom and trip their little brains out. And then because they were in the Arctic Circle, they would go up and where they would go urinate, and the snow would turn into a salt lick because it was frozen urine in the snow, and other animals would lick it and trip. And so you can take Amanita and trip your brains out, and when you have to go pee in a pot and save it, because you can get high on the pee in the pot tomorrow after the Amanita wears off. And tomorrow, when you're high off of the pee in the pot, save that pee too, and it will go through about 3 cycles before it loses the intensity to get you high. Just saying. Who was the first guy who thought of that? Anyway. If you're injecting frequently, then you're doing tissue damage, and you can cause, ulcers, abscesses, things like that. You may have heard about the horrible drug crocodile that people were using in place of heroin in places like Russia and Romania and places like that. And it's the poor man's heroin. But it's not an opiate. It's not an opioid. It's something entirely different. But it has the desired effect. Except it's also the flesh-eating drug that causes huge ulcers that sometimes eat to the bone. It's horrible. So there are risks of tissue damage with that. There's also more metabolic issues. if you're mixing drugs together, no matter how you take them, you can be snorting cocaine, shooting cocaine, rectally injecting cocaine, which isn't good. And however you're getting into it and drinking alcohol with it. This isn't uncommon. People go to bars and they're drinking and partying all night long and occasionally slipping off to the bathroom, doing a line or two of coke and coming back and partying some more. You don't run a real risk of overdose from that, but as your body metabolizes both the alcohol and the cocaine, a third substance, cocaethylene, or cocanol, as sometimes called, is created through the metabolic process. Cocaethylene is stronger than either one of the parent drugs, which isn't uncommon. We see that a lot. If you take heroin, the first stage breakdown of heroin is morphine, and morphine is pretty badass in itself. It's not stronger than heroin, but it's still a very powerful first stage active metabolite. Cocaethylene is a very powerful first stage active metabolite. In the brain, once you get the drug into you and into the bloodstream and into the brain, it begins to do stuff. And the stuff it does, some of it's desirable, and some of the stuff it does is totally undesirable and unwanted, but it does it anyway. It has effects on neurons. And a lot of drugs have effects on neurons. Marijuana has a bad effect on neurons. It causes them to space out. It widens the gaps between them. You find delta-9 THC inside the neuron, inside the cell itself. It invades the cell. What does it do in there? I'm not real sure. I just know that it's in there, and it's probably not just sitting. Anyway, so it has an effect on neurons. It affects the sensitivity of the neurons. It causes them to fire with less excitatory cause, or it causes them not to fire and requires more excitatory cause, which is an action potential, but we'll talk about that later too. So the neurons are affected, and how they, and as neurons are affected, it in turn affects neurotransmission, on how well they're able to fulfill their role in neurotransmissions, which is communications between cells, which causes outcomes behaviorally, mentally, emotionally, all kinds of ways. The effects on neurotransmission, on neurotransmitters, and there are lots of them, is to either cause them to do something or prohibit them from doing something, to impair their effectiveness, or impair their ability to be manufactured, deployed, reuptaken, all of the things that occur in a neurotransmission. The effects overall on the brain often lead to organic brain syndromes, and there are organic brain syndromes that do occur with marijuana, but they occur a lot with alcohol. And you'll see a bunch of symptoms, and we'll talk about them later on, that's referred to as wet brain, which is things like alcoholic dementia, Korsakoff psychosis, Wernicke syndrome, bunch of things. Neurotransmitters that are associated with substance abuse, and Shannon Odell talked about this in that little clip that I showed you, is gamma aminobutyric acid. It's inhibitory, slows things down. That's the stop chemical that she referred to. Norepinephrine is activating. It's one that triggers behavior or things happening. Activating, it enhances communication between neurons. Dopamine, this is involved in the way we respond to certain drugs, including things like cocaine and other substances. Serotonin is associated with satiation, and that's having enough, knowing that you've had enough of whatever. Anxiety, depression, impulsivity. It also plays a role in aggression and suicidal behavior. And so people who have out of whack serotonin levels in their system, also this shows up behaviorally in prolonged depression and other types of self-defeating or dangerous behaviors. Glutamate, remember the glutanergics that she was talking about, the major excitatory neurotransmitter, the GO chemical. This is triggered by a lot of drug use. Cocaine will fire that up like nobody's business. Endorphins, these are the body's natural opioids. Your body manufactures opioids. They're involved with pleasure, with feelings of well-being. They're also pain relievers, these neuropeptides that our bodies generate to help us deal with painful consequences to things. If you headaches, a sprained ankle, whatever, you have higher levels of endorphins when you have that. Unless, of course, you're taking heroin or morphine or Oxycontin or Vicodin or something like that, and then when you try to stop taking those, you'll discover how many endorphins you don't have. Not happy. In conclusion, when you take chemicals into the body, these chemicals have effects. Sometimes they're good effects, sometimes they're not so good effects, sometimes they're deadly. And generally speaking, I just want to speak generally about this, most of the substances that we can take that are available to us pharmacologically, that are out there, there are a lot of these substances that are abused that have a very good therapeutic value. They could be used for other things. Marijuana is a good drug to be used for certain circumstances, certain illnesses, certain conditions. Heroin is a great analgesic, it's a pain-relieving drug, and all of the opiates and opioids have the effects of being pain relievers and antitussives that keep you from coughing and things like that. Drugs of abuse are certainly among the chemicals that have good effects, but they're also among the chemicals that have bad effects, and they are certainly among the chemicals that have deadly effects. Some of these drugs of abuse, such as alcohol, such as heroin, such as marijuana even, lead to identifiable substance use disorders that are problematic for people and that they need treatment for. And because that's in conclusion, I'm done with PowerPoint, and all I have to do now is turn it into a YouTube link and put it in your course room, and you'll be good to go. So that's about the lay of the land for Chapter 3, and you'll have Chapter 4 coming along for next week, and we'll just move right through it. I hope you're getting something out of these. I hope you're enjoying them. I try to be a little bit entertaining, even though it's a very serious subject, and there's nothing funny about drug addiction really. But you got to admit, we put ourselves in some really weird situations sometimes that could be otherwise comical. If you have any questions, start a discussion post, send me an email, whatever, and I'll try to answer those if I can. Till then, see you next week.